Hello and welcome to the latest Manufacturing Management Live panel. My name is Chris Beck. I'm the editor of Manufacturing Management. Today's session is being sponsored by Sage, the software provider that helps manufacturers perform at their best. I'm delighted to be joined by Sage's Vice President of Product, Robert Sinfield. Also joining me are Bhavina Bharkada, the Senior Campaigns and Policy Manager at Make UK, the manufacturers organisation, Tony Hague, CEO of Midlands-based subcontract manufacturer PP Control and Automation, and Tamara Makarenko, the Chief Operating Officer and Global Head of Investigations at risk consultancy Sybilline. Thank you all for being here today. Today's discussion will be exploring a topic that has been thrown into sharp focus in recent months by the supply chains. The events of the past 6 months have demonstrated the reliance of the manufacturing industry and wider society on global supply chains. As the coronavirus swept its way, starting in China and then across all four corners of the globe, it's left a trail of disrupted supplies in its wake. And for manufacturers who are reliant on just-in-time, highly optimised deliveries, it quickly became a struggle to keep up. Make UK's most recent Manufacturing Monitor survey found that over half, 54%, have seen logistics travel times increase, with many manufacturers reporting as much as a 25% increase in the time taken to have goods arrive on site. In addition, making this an even more pressing concern is Brexit, which, despite having taken a backseat since the turn of the year, isn't going anywhere. Worryingly though, Make UK's survey again found that over 2/3 of manufacturers weren't planning on reviewing their logistics arrangements in the run-up to Brexit. And with a new and as yet unknown border arrangement post-Brexit, it's imperative for any manufacturer that trades overseas or relies on an international supply chain to consider how things may be about to change and look at ways of adapting through, for example, reshoring their supply chain back to the UK. Now, luckily, we have some leading experts here today to discuss all that. So let's kick off with a question for Tony, actually. Can you tell us about PP Control and Automation, your supply chain, and how it's been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic, if it has indeed at all?
Yeah, certainly, Chris. PP Control and Automation, as you said, we're a strategic outsourcing partner for machine builders. So we employ 230 people at our factory in the West Midlands and work with some of the largest machinery builders across the globe in a range of market sectors: processing, packaging, food, metal cutting, etc. Our supply chains actually are incredibly complex, a myriad of parts, very complex bills of material, product sourced UK, Europe, globally. But fortunately, the impact on our business has actually been minimal. But I think that's down to the fact that we understand the complexities of our supply chain. We understand the supply chain end to end. Many of our customers are working to can, bandit, and daily deliveries. So we have to understand the supply chain in intricate detail, because if we don't deliver to a customer tomorrow, we basically stop their production line the following day. So there's an awful lot of care and attention in the intricacies of that supply chain. So fortunately, we've traded all through the pandemic. We haven't missed a beat, really. The factory's been open every day. In fact, we were open all over Easter, supported things like the ventilator challenge as well. So really, we just haven't stopped and just kept going. Not without some challenges, like everybody else, but fortunately, we've got through it relatively unscathed.
Great. Well, that's testament to the robustness of your company and your supply chain. Bhavina, is Tony's experience? Is he one of the lucky ones, or is manufacturing coping? Coped quite well since lockdown and since the pandemic started?
So as Tony mentioned, lots of manufacturers have actually stayed open during the COVID pandemic, and that's testament to the hard work to be able to stay open. I think that in terms of the impact on supply chains, it's been quite mixed. You mentioned in your introductory remarks about our Manufacturing Monitor. So that's a fortnightly survey we did of manufacturers to understand what impact COVID-19 had on their business. So we looked at redundancy, supply chains, logistics, a range of factors, but to understand what impact geopolitical events are having more generally on manufacturing supply chains. And one of the things we found in that work is that almost 7 in 10 manufacturers only monitor their immediate suppliers, and only 13% monitored their entire supply chain, whether up or down. So I think what we're seeing is there is a clear visibility gap for many manufacturers, not quite understanding how parts, components, and goods are moving. So I think Tony, in that respect, is probably an exception, which is clearly a good thing. But we need to do more work around making sure that we have visibility about where our parts are coming from, how they move. And I think it's probably a little bit sometimes misleading when we use the word supply chains, because it assumes this kind of linear process, when actually we have really quite complex networks that are connected across sectors, countries, and places. So it's a complex and integrated supply chain, but maybe network is probably the right word to use. So it's been a difficult couple of months, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Rob and Tamara, I don't know if you've got anything you'd like to add to that at all.
I just like, I'll jump on the back of what Bhavina was saying in terms of supply chains, often the more advanced ones being more of a network, which I completely agree. From sort of a geopolitical perspective, and somebody who's run global investigations for a rather long time, the visibility on your supply chain is incredibly important, albeit sometimes very difficult and not necessarily considered a strategic question in times of, may I say, political stability, economic stability. But we talk about geopolitics and how geopolitics happens and how the world there are global events. And there's a difference between a geopolitical event and a geopolitical crisis, I think. And this is the nuance in that distinction. Impact supply chains a lot more, and our need to know where our vulnerabilities are. So a geopolitical event, for example, is something that is ongoing and that we monitor. Relations with China. Relations with China may have deteriorated over the past 4 months, but they weren't very good 5 months ago either, right? So these types of events we should be monitoring and understanding what the flashpoints or the watch points are that might change our vulnerability to that event. A crisis is something where, kind of hits us from left field. And then we have lockdowns, and then we have social distancing, and then we have geopolitical events escalating on top of that. So we've got new sanctions, and we have time for social events to happen. Protests, the rise of Black Lives Matter. Exacerbated concerns about the environment, because now we know that pollution can go down in cities because nobody's driving, nobody's doing X, Y, and Z. So all of these things just confine space and time. And then if you sit in the C-suite, if you're sitting around the board table, you're going, okay, where are we vulnerable? That's a question we need to be asking well before the events, not in crisis. Once in crisis, we get caught in a spiral of knee-jerk reaction, and once you're knee-jerking, you're further risking your operations.
Sure, Rob.
If I could build on the back of that, I think probably the greatest lesson for supply chain managers and people managing these types of networks is that we've almost become blind to the importance of resilience, because we've been focusing so much on lean, reduction of costs. We've been reliant on China as the low-cost supplier of choice, and that's fine. But what we have done at the same time is we've actually just zoned out of the major challenge here, which is why some of the companies are struggling, is there's no plan B. There was no operational strategy in place that said, if I can't source things from China, where am I going to source them? You would have thought that we would have learned after what happened with Fukushima, what happened with some of the other natural disasters, that this reliance on a specific set of countries for supplying very vital components is going to be challenging. So I think we're going to see a big change in the way that supply chains work. I think we need to be careful that we avoid going down the route of protectionism. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge here, is that we keep this idea of the global economy and globalization open without kind of closing borders and becoming very, very protectionist, because I don't think that's going to help anybody going forward. It's going to just make it more difficult for us to get this resolved.
Absolutely, yeah. Tony, I'll turn back to you. were talking about your supply chain earlier and how it's already quite UK focused and into Europe. How feasible is it to bring, if not all, the majority of your supply chain back to the UK, and what impact would that have on your kind of outward business and the customers that you could sell to and work with?
I think if answer that question more from a perspective of, as a subcontract manufacturer, we're a UK-based business. We buy parts predominantly UK and Europe, but supply large OEMs. So I think the bigger question would be is for end users to reshore. So there are we supply certain types of customers, but when you look at other sectors, there is clearly an opportunity if those subcontract manufacturers existed in the UK for those companies that Rob alluded to. Typically they've chased low-cost geographies. There hasn't been a plan B. It's all been focused around, I wouldn't even say been focused around lean. I'd say it's been focused around lowest price. I don't even think lean came into for some people. And certain sectors have perhaps done that more than others. Not picking on them, but I guess take automotive. A large part of the automotive supply chain exists and outside the UK. And I suppose then the question is if you're an automotive prime, do you actually have the opportunity to buy those parts from a UK company? Do they even exist? So it's not even a function of price. Are we prepared to pay a little bit more for it? It's actually, is that capability actually, does it actually exist in the UK full stop? Because you can't buy something from the UK if that company doesn't exist. So you get into this chicken, egg, chicken situation. And I'm very passionate about reshoring. I think the UK has chosen not to manufacture certain things. We've made decisions not to do certain things, not to invest. And picking up the point Rob made is, have people got short memories? So on the back of other natural disasters, on the back of all things COVID-19, we're seeing supply chains. We're actually being presented with new opportunities at PP as a UK subcontract manufacturer, from OEMs that have historically outsourced to Eastern Europe, have outsourced to India, have outsourced to China, and they're now talking to us to establish whether we could be a viable outsourcing partner for them. But of course, we're not necessarily going to be as cheap, as low cost. And it's whether people are prepared to pay a little bit more and have a secure, localized supply chain that manages risk, or will they just continue to chase the lowest price, which will mean probably going out to an LCG. So I think to answer your question, Chris, I'd say, does the capability exist in the first place? And if not, we've got a problem. Can we bring it back into the UK? Or is it a case that they do exist, but the primes aren't prepared to spend a little bit more and work with those companies to actually improve them, invest in them, and make them more viable longer term as a UK-based supplier?
Absolutely, Bhavina, you represent Make UK. You represent the UK's manufacturing sector. So to kind of pick up on Tony's point, do those companies exist, and if not, should they?
So I'll just take one step back, because these are the exact questions we actually asked as part of our work with Oracle. We basically wanted to understand if manufacturers were changing their supply bases and their proportions of sort of international suppliers, EU and UK. So this is obviously caveated in that it's just an intention, but 34% of manufacturers said they anticipate that the proportion of their UK suppliers will moderately increase in the next 2 years. And 14% said it would increase significantly. Caveat it with the fact that it's just an intention in the next 2 years. It's not that they've done it already, but I think that's a clear signal that people are now looking at, how do I not necessarily replace existing supply chains that we have globally, but how do I support them with more local suppliers to help build that resilience? So when we asked them about the strategies that they were using to improve their supply chain performance, better collaboration with suppliers and increased use of local suppliers were the two biggest ones. So I can see and agree with Tony in that maybe in the next couple of years we might see a slight shift. But again, you need those manufacturers there to be able to produce those parts. So where you have established supply chains like in aerospace, like in automotive, to shift that back to the UK will mean that there will be some business businesses that will have to take the risk to produce those parts. We might not be as cost competitive on that compared to other places, but if the intention is there to do it, then I think over the number of years that can build up and we can be a bit more cost competitive. But there is clearly a signal and an intent. What happens in the next 5 years, no one will be able to tell. I mean, there'll probably be another geopolitical crisis or event, but clearly a shift has happened. So it's just one to watch.
Sure. Rob, have you got any comment on what Bhavina's just said?
I think I do have some comments, and I kind of want to caveat everything by saying the next few years are going to be challenging. I don't think there is any answer. There are no quick wins to what we're experiencing right now. We're going to have to be very careful of protectionism. I think that's probably going to be one of the biggest political threats to what we need to be able to do. We have to look at practical things. So fewer people getting on airplanes means fewer freight aircraft flying in the air, which ultimately is going to mean availability of resource and equipment or parts or components is going to be more difficult. And there is going to be a cost implication, because some of these lower cost geographies are not going to be low cost geographies going forward, because they may have ramped down production, they will have done something. But I think I'm a little bit more optimistic than what those statistics that were quoted may represent. You look at the way that UK companies have transitioned from what they were doing 3 months ago to making PPE, to working on vaccines, to developing new type of equipment, to making respirators, etc., etc. It just goes to show how quickly the British manufacturing industry can adapt. We're in an incredibly adaptive industry. What it does also say is that this idea of the staid, very traditional, very sort of stuck in the past image of British manufacturing is completely out there. It's not representative of what the truth is. So there's a lot of optimism that we should have about this if we look at what's been done. So I would say it's going to be challenging. Yes, there will be a change, but let's see this as a massive opportunity for British manufacturing to really become the crown jewel in manufacturing globally.
If I could just jump in there, as part of the same work we were doing, we saw a massive increase in the proportion of people saying that they are proud of our manufacturing sector, but also the reputational, I guess, positivity around UK manufacturing. So again, when we ran our Manufacturing Heroes campaign, which was to highlight the amazing work that we do in this country, we make some vital things, we produce lots of great stuff. People recognize that. We were as critical as some of the other sectors that stayed open. I think the fact that we were allowed to stay open is testament to the work that UK manufacturers have done. So I completely agree with Rob that now is the time when we should be taking advantage of this. So as we think about a post-COVID recovery, as we think about building back better, at the heart of sort of reviving local economies and our national strategy of what the new, economy should look like, should be a really, really strong industrial base with UK manufacturing at its heart. Some of that is bringing stuff back here. Some of that is making in our global ties even stronger. So it's sort of like a combination of all of it. But, in moments of crisis, there's always opportunity. And I think this is one.
Yeah, and I would say, so long as the crisis continues, then there is a lot of room for opportunity in terms of rebuilding, retooling our own domestic economy, and that innovation at home, I think, is a really interesting topic to explore. Even I suppose the devil on my shoulder says, if the crisis doesn't continue, if the global economy turns back as quickly as it did post both financial crises, which actually, quite frankly, turned around relatively quickly, is our short-term memory going to come back? And I dare to say, after the two financial crises of sort of the past 12 years, we have short-termism. You know, at the end of the day, it's we need to meet the demands of shareholders. We need to meet the demands of life, of business, of prosperity, and it's way too easy to slot back into that norm because we understand it. What would be great somehow, sort of the silver lining of this COVID crisis, of what's happened, and you know, the way COVID's forced so many of us to look at our own businesses differently, that we actually grasp that opportunity and go, how can we help make this world a slightly different? And that doesn't need to be protectionism or sort of just keeping everything close to home, but maybe just reconsidering where our vulnerabilities are and always having a plan B, and being able to balance our involvement in the global economy with building a strong home economy, which quite frankly has taken a hit. And how do we bring all of those people back into business who've been pushed out as a result?
Absolutely, yeah.
I've got that, which I think there's a unique opportunity that we've never had before for British manufacturing companies. So Tony's company, for example, looking at delivering. We talk about software as a service, and I bring it back to the industry that I work in. You rent capacity, you rent capabilities. Why would we not look at creating manufacturing hubs within the UK and essentially renting capacity, renting capabilities? We've got incredible innovation taking place here all the time. Why would we not want to outsource manufacturing from other countries into the UK and say, you know what, you've got those tough, really complex engineering projects. We've built a CNC farm that we can rent our capacity. And so new types of manufacturing, 3D printing, looking at all of those sorts of innovations and really bringing them to life. Before COVID, the UK was lagging behind significantly in the adoption of Industry 4.0. This could present us with the opportunity to leapfrog countries like Germany and get right to the front of the queue and deliver those types of efficiencies through a different type of business model, and also at the same time drive things like the circular economy, intelligent design, optimization of the supply chains, even within our own environments, sensible sourcing, et cetera, because I think people will start to see the benefits of that. Look at some of the impacts that we've seen from the reduction in outputs and hazardous gases, et cetera, as a result of reduced pollution.
I think you're right, Rob. I mean, I think you touched upon lean earlier. I think if you look at sort of historic factories, they were all looking at now, how could we have large, relatively inflexible, but relatively lean organisations that lacked agility. And I think, you know, UK manufacturing now needs to invest heavily in automation. I use the word automation rather than robotics because I think sometimes Industry 4.0 is one of those phrases that scares the hell out of people and is misunderstood horribly. But just investment in automation, wherever that automation is for that organisation, how it benefits them, creating smaller, flexible, agile organisations where the batch manufacture cost of one is similar to the batch cost of manufacture of 100, rather than these large organisations that are very much process driven, very lean, but actually completely lack agility, can't be responsive. Because you look at buying habits of company now, the buying habits have changed. It's about mass customization now, rather than if in certain sectors where you're making 20,000 widgets a minute of a certain type, you've got to be, it's a completely different model of how it was even 5 years ago.
Absolutely, and Rob, you read my mind. I was about to ask about the future Industry 4 and the role that that technology can play, and I think you and Tony there have kind of explained how like now might be a big chance to almost hit a big reset button and kind of really think about implementing Industry 4 and technology. I know, Tony, you're quite right in saying that the phrase Industry 4 quite often sounds a bit big and scary, but now's the time to kind of make that leap. Bhavina, are your fortnightly monitor and the other work that you're doing, are you seeing more of an uptake and more of an acceptance of things like automation as a direct result of the events of the last few months?
Yeah, definitely. I think people are now exploring how do we better use things like just data. How do I use that and adopt technology in my business? And it's not just the really cool stuff like AI and virtual reality and that kind of stuff. It's actually the really boring business process innovation and how better data can help your business in that space. So it needs to be, when we think about any strategies looking forward or any kind of resilient plan, data needs to be at the heart of that. What you get in to be able to understand what's working well, what isn't, and what technology can support me. But I think there is a role for national government here in that we've pushed hard, that we spend a lot of money on things like research and development. I think that's great. But what we're missing is how, as a business, if I'm in rural Leicestershire, do I adopt that into my own business? And I think sometimes it can be scary because you just don't know where to start. So you'll have some manufacturers who get it and they will have great technology. They'll have cobots, they'll have all sorts of things in their business. But unfortunately, there is a long tail of businesses who are not quite sure about how to approach this. And I think that's where we need better initiatives, including things like Made Smarter rolled out nationally. Those sort of groups, those peer-to-peer networks help businesses understand what do I need to do in my own business practically to implement some of this technology. So there's a role for manufacturers themselves, and I think there's a role for us as Make UK to continue to push to government that actually we need to be doing more around that adoption, not just let's do more around research development. How do I take that technology and make it beneficial for my business? And that starts with things like data. The one thing I would say, and we might come onto it, is it can be scary because sometimes you don't have the skills in your business to be able to take that and maybe have the kind of cultural leadership change that you need, that requires you to be quite brave to implement that change. So we might come onto it, but the skills challenge is a whole other ball game. But it's something that we need to think about when we start thinking about how do we make sure that supply chains is part of not just an add-on on finance, it's at the heart of your strategy, logistics, the adoption of technology. You need the skills in your business to be able to take that and say, right, this is how we're going to run with it going forward.
Absolutely. If we, sorry, Rob, were you?
I was just going to say that there's an interesting word that we've used a couple of times throughout this conversation, and that's innovation. That word is probably incredibly scary for everybody, because when everybody thinks about innovation, they think of, I have to invent a new material like graphene, or I have to do something that revolutionizes an industry and completely changes it. So I think we get lost in that word. It creates this misnomer that it has to be a big thing, a monumental, fundamental change. There's different types of innovation, and this is what we need to get companies to understand, that innovation can be taking something that is a mundane, ordinary process that you do that may be very complex and manual, and automating that. That's one form of automation, of innovation. Innovation could be saying, you know what, there's a really good process that we have in finance. Let's try it out in distribution, see if it works. So adjacent innovation. It doesn't have to revolutionize what you're doing, because that's where sort of real innovation comes from. But innovation could be a multitude of different things on a scale. And I think when we use words like innovation, immediately companies withdraw because they think cost, expense, time, experimentation. Experimentation is about doing things quickly, learning a lesson, failing fast, and moving on to something else. And this is where I think UK manufacturing has proven that we can do this. Just look at what's happened over the last 3 months. We've done it. We've innovated all the way, changed business models throughout.
Absolutely, yeah. And we'll just quickly touch on Bhavina's point about skills, I suppose. You know, if we've got this grand plan for bringing supply chains and bringing manufacturing back to the UK and really flying the flag, I suppose the obvious question is who's going to do all these manufacturing jobs? As Bhavina has alluded to, we've got a skills crisis in the industry anyway. So if we're going to start bringing supply chains and making things a bit more I know you don't want to use the word protectionist, Rob, but we'll call it localized. Then I guess, Tony, how are you, recruiting and kind of finding that pool of talented workforce, not just for you, but for making sure your suppliers are able to be skilled?
I know we talk about the skills gap. I actually don't see that we have the size of problem that's sometimes made out in truth. I mean, there was certainly a vacuum of engineers going back a number of years, I think, when the apprenticeship system had fallen over before it got reinvested in, should we call it, and dare I say reinvented. I think there's an awful lot of effort going on within schools, within STEM, within FE, the universities, with KTPs. I mean, we've got some fantastic facilities like Warwick Manufacturing Group. We work with WMG. There's some fantastic organisations out there if you're prepared to read, as a manufacturer, prepared to reach out to them. So I actually don't. We don't have an issue recruiting the right people, whether across all disciplines. Now, whether that's a West Midlands thing, I can't really say. I'm sure in certain geographic regions there may be different challenges based on employment and employers in that area and the competitive nature, etc. So, but I don't think. I think it's one of those things that I hear a lot of companies bemoaning about. It's a government problem to reach out and train it. I actually there's an awful lot more that manufacturers can do without always blaming government or lack of government intervention or initiatives. We started years ago just reaching out to all the local schools and visiting schools and getting the kids into our factory, talking about careers in engineering, talking about how exciting engineering and manufacturing actually was. It's not low paid, it's not Dickensian, it's actually really exciting place to be. So I think there's a lot we can do ourselves as manufacturers. I think we have responsibilities to do it. And we don't find personally the skills gap is the problem. I come back to the biggest problem I see in terms of the ability to reshore, grow productivity, etc., is the short-termism of companies, short-term attention to profit rather than long-term investment, certainly investments in automation, robotics, etc. So, rightly or wrongly, we don't see the skills gap as being a bigger problem as others.
That's actually music to my ears, Tony.
I
should say that I used to work as an education skills policy advisor, so I had to hear endless companies saying that they couldn't find the people that they need. I think there is obviously a gap in certain regions of the UK, but I think you hit the nail on the head, Tony, in that it's about reaching out, building those connections with schools, engaging with people, young people in schools, but also making sure that they're aware of all the different pathways that are available to them. And you're right, manufacturing is cool, it's interesting, it's fun, it's challenging. You become natural problem solvers. You're solving some of the biggest problems that we have going on right now. So I think it's a great time to also join the industry. So actually, again, it's turning that sort of crisis into opportunity. Some people will look and think, wow, UK manufacturing was the reason that we had all those ventilators, that we made sure that we had food on our shelves. The supermarkets were full, maybe not of toilet roll, but that's fine. But yeah, I think it changes the perception of what people think about UK manufacturing, and that is really important. So we can take advantage of that when we think about, right, if I'm going to build a pipeline of talent in my business, and some of that isn't just your traditional manufacturing skills, it's those digital skills, it's young people who are interested in things like green manufacturing, shared economy, that kind of stuff. Now is that time. So yeah, again, opportunity for us to take advantage of.
Yeah,
absolutely. We've got an elephant in the room here, and it's kind of looming towards the end of the year and the beginning of next year. And Tamara, maybe I could, and Rob and everyone really. There's Brexit coming, and that kind of touches on everything that we've talked about so far, whether it's the skills, the access to overseas suppliers, whatever. Things are, as it stands, things are set to change in some capacity. We're not entirely sure how. Tamara, as a kind of a risk specialist, I suppose. How should companies and manufacturers be looking at mitigating the potential effects of Brexit, how, in whatever form it takes, I suppose? How does that differ from other risks, such as the kind of unexpected risk that we're going through at the moment?
Like even unexpected risks, I think you can engage in annual scenario planning and go, is our business resilient to even the most extreme? And those types of risks, you know that the probability is very low, and so you kind of go, yeah, we think we're resilient enough. Brexit is a thorn in everyone's side at the moment, particularly in terms of strategic and operational planning. Why? Because we still have too much uncertainty. We still don't know what's happening and how that's going to trickle down into each industry. What's going to happen with the trade agreement? What's going to happen with taxes? What's going to happen with access to seasonal labor? I live on the east coast of Scotland, and there are a lot of strawberry farms here. Who's going to pick our strawberries, quite frankly? All of these, there is great uncertainty. So, my only answer right now is to almost employ a good old-fashioned risk process, which is to take something like horizon scanning, scenario planning, and go, okay, within this Brexit situation, where are our vulnerabilities? Where are our opportunities? And how can we navigate that uncertainty? And it really is, as a business, bringing in your speaking around the table very openly with your legal team, with your business development team, with your logistics supply, any critical team, and go, okay, if scenario A happens, can we deal with it? If worst case scenario X happens, can we deal with it? And depending on these pillars, what would we need to do quickly? So essentially what I'm saying is we need to pre-plan, and we need to pre-plan for 3 or 4 scenarios. And if we can do that, we need to understand there's a flexibility, and it might be something between 1 and 3, but we know what we will need to do. We will know that we're going to need to call the solicitor down the hallway, or whoever next door, and say, okay, let's implement this plan. The quicker we can do that, the less of a shock it's going to be, and the fewer of us are going to put our heads and say, but nobody told us. We know negotiations are ongoing. The legal experts, the logistics, everybody who has a certain expertise has been looking at the various different scenarios, bring them together in your business and go, how is it going to impact me? That's my best answer, because I am not going to predict which way things are going to go. Not in this call, at least. So, it's be prepared. We have so much time to be prepared. And being in the risk industry, that process people often treat as a thorn in their side, as something that needs to be done. It's a checkbox, but no, use it creatively and use it very honestly.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. Rob, a quick one for you, I suppose. Similar to kind of Tamara, you at Sage are able to look across a range of industries and see how they're preparing for Brexit. How would you say UK manufacturing is faring when it comes to, all the uncertainty and the kind of step into the unknown that Tamara was just talking about? Are they resilient, and are they about to weather the storm, any potential storm, quite well?
That's a really interesting question. I think I'm gonna tackle this from a different end and say that we know that there's disruption coming. We know it's going to be a difficult period. We still don't know what the impact is of COVID-19 long term. We don't know what the long-term impact of Brexit is going to be. Like Tamara said, plan, mitigate as much as you can, be creative in the way that we do things. But there's one area that I think companies could actually be doing themselves a little bit of a favor, and that is, and yes, I represent a technology company, but it's really important that companies are using this period right now where there is a downturn, where there is a little bit less coming through the funnel, to get onto the latest updates of their solutions. Make sure that you're current. Make sure that that technological risk is eliminated as much as it can, because if you're on an old system that is 15 years old, will your vendor be able to deliver all of the new requirements that will be necessary for Brexit? I can't tell you, because we still don't know. We're actively working with the government. We have representatives working with HMRC on a daily basis, trying to understand what is the implication of this. What is this going to do for something as simple as intrastat reporting? How are we going to have to do that? How are we going to have to manage that? So there are a lot of unknown variables. So like Tamara said, plan those out, manage those scenarios, work on getting yourself to a technological safety point where you feel like you're at least protected. Be proactive about that process. Reach out to your vendor, understand what they're doing, and try and get ahead of the curve on that. Honestly speaking, I think a lot of companies have kind of gone, well, it's not really a problem at the moment. We know something's going to happen. And there's almost been this approach of, I'm going to bury my head in the sand. I hope to God that's not the case, because I would hate to see British manufacturers getting caught in a massive rush, a little bit like what happened with the Y2K discussions. And we're almost, it's a similar thing. What's going to happen? Is my system still going to work? Is it the end of the world? Are we all going to stop being able to process everything when Brexit happens? So plan for the worst, and hopefully the best will happen, and companies can go from there. But it's a little bit of a guess at best.
Tony, is that something you've already been doing? Is Tamara and Rob, have they been saying things that have been on your agenda for a while?
I think everything that's just been discussed is part of a business interruption strategy, fundamentally a more holistic approach to disaster recovery and planning and business interruption. I think Brexit's got side railed because people have been focused on the matters in hand over the last few months for obvious reasons, and some companies have been in survival mode, quite frankly. So Brexit is just another major issue to contend with when they've got clear of the current challenges, I guess. But I think, but manufacturers, certainly, we've had plenty of time. It's not as though COVID-19 hit us left field. Brexit hasn't. This has been going on like an EastEnders trilogy for how long now? I don't know. It just seems forever. So, it's not as though it's going to come as a massive surprise. So there again, it wouldn't be a massive surprise if something changed between now and the end of the year, would it? So we've got plenty of time to prepare. Most of us prepared with our supply chains, our customers, our systems, 12, 18 months ago when we first thought it was coming. So the fact that the can's been kicked down the road for the best part of 2 years, really, there's no excuse for poor planning, because this isn't a coronavirus situation, is it? This is something that we can all imminently plan for to a date. But picking up Tamara's point, that the problem is what are you preparing for? Are we preparing for a deal? A no deal? We still really don't quite know what we're all preparing for. I think that's the biggest problem. So just plan every eventuality and hope for the best. As we said earlier, I'm the eternal optimist. So my glass is always half full, Chris.
So it should be, absolutely.
In manufacturing, it has to be.
Bhavina, quickly before we wrap up, how are you seeing? Are other manufacturers again sharing Tony's optimism, or are we kind of stumbling blind in some cases?
I'd probably say it's somewhere in the middle, maybe not quite on the Tony level yet. But I agree, like COVID-19 has obviously slowed down their preparations, because for lots of manufacturers, it's just been pure survival. But like Tony has said, we know that something is happening, and we know the date at which it's happening. I think it's just a case of what is that unknown. Obviously, a no trade deal Brexit would be difficult. There are many jobs across the UK that depend on us having that kind of ambitious trade agreement with the EU. So we just obviously have to keep our eyes on that. There will be significant administrative and regulatory changes ahead, and it will take a bit of time to adjust to that. And like everyone has said, preparation is key. It's just, what are you preparing for? And I guess that's our job, just to make sure that we're keeping manufacturers in the loop, supporting them where they can. And they're not in this by themselves. So we will be there to support them as much as we can. And hopefully, come 6 months, it might be okay. But I'm gonna take Tony's half full attitude, and hopefully it'll be okay. It's just one thing to flag is that for lots of manufacturers, they still believe that it will take up to a year to return to those kind of like normal trading conditions. So as you're dealing with that shock, you're then leaving the EU, that coupled together, as well as trying to adapt to a new way of working, it will be difficult, but eternal optimists, we can do it. We are problem solvers.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Rob, just coming to you for kind of a final question, really. We've spoken a lot in the last 45 minutes or so about you know, a lot of the challenges, whether that's skills, whether that's technology, whether that's Brexit, whatever. How can Sage, as a technology provider, support manufacturers with some of the problems and the headaches they might be having, whether it's coronavirus related, whether it's Brexit related, or, you know, just a combination of the above?
So it's a really good question, and there are two lenses to view this through. What are we doing from a longer term technology perspective to support companies? Well, we're investing heavily in artificial intelligence, machine learning, in delivering those sorts of capabilities to people to help them to work on the challenges in their supply chain. Looking at technologies like blockchain, technology companies like Sage have, and I say this in all honesty, have in the past been very guilty of, here's a framework, go out and do this, you can support IoT. What we're now focusing on instead are, here are the use cases which are specific to your industry that should be plug and play. You should be able to use these relatively easily with a little bit of customization or personalization to meet your own needs. I think that's a significant change that's taking place in the industry, rather than just delivering frameworks and capabilities that are very generic. We're getting quite specific in the way that we're doing things. If we look at some of the things that we're doing shorter term, obviously compliance and ensuring that the capabilities that we're building are robust and will support folks as they look to take on some of the challenges around Brexit and manage that uncertainty. The ability to mine data out of systems and get access to that information, because we're sitting on a wealth of information as it is today. There are interesting statistics. If you look at why data projects fail in companies, the majority of those projects fail not because they don't have the right tools, but it's because they can't even agree on what are we trying to measure. It's like having a GPS and you ask everybody in the car, where do you want to go? And you get 20 different answers. It's a big car, obviously, but it's a little bit of that. You have to get everybody to agree, what are the top 5 things that we want to measure? If you can get that, you can start to make progress, because you'll be able to see those actionable insights turn into real power. The mistake that we make is we give people too much data, and then instead of it being management by exception, it becomes analysis, paralysis by analysis, or analysis by paralysis. We overanalyze everything. Oh, I can see this, I can see that. Pick the top 5 initiatives, work on them, and most vendors like Sage will be able to support you to get access to what are those top 5 things, and then go forward from there.
Brilliant. And if people need more information, Rob, what's the best way to get in touch?
So there are tons of ways to get in touch with us. Sage.com is a really good source of information. We have advice blogs on Sage that we publish to companies, so they can go in and they can look for advice at sage.com. That's a really good source of information. We have podcasts going out, but also working with organizations like UK Manufacturing and looking at these sorts of things. Reach out to your peers, reach out to peer groups. It's not just about what Sage can offer. I think there's a massive opportunity for us to build this community of manufacturers and learn from each other and share and go from there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Unfortunately, we are rapidly running out of time. This has obviously been a very interesting debate. I think we've got quite a range of opinions on the panel here, especially, you know, Tony's eternal optimism, which, you know, is great to see. It's great to see a manufacturer, a successful manufacturer in the UK, you know, so positive about the challenges ahead and the current conditions. I think the key takeaway really is Tamara's point. You know, plan for the worst and hope for the best in many respects. If anyone watching has a follow-up question or a follow-up comment for any of the participants, please leave a comment below the news story or get in touch with me. My email address will be on the email that gets that this was sent out on. So please don't hesitate. If you've got anything to say, positive or negative, about any of the comments, I'll make sure the speaker gets to see them. Thank you very much to Tamara, Tony, Bhavina and Rob for taking part. Thank you for your time today. Thank you to everyone at home watching this. We hope you really enjoyed it. And finally, thank you very much to Sage for supporting this event. Thank you all, and see you soon.